Create a YouTube video using this script. Table of contents. Part 1, intro, about 2 sections. 1, a monstrous hatred. 2, a dark path. Section 1, a monstrous hatred. Adolf Hitler's name echoes through history. He is a figure synonymous with evil. His regime brought unimaginable suffering to millions. At the heart of his twisted ideology was a monstrous hatred, anti-Semitism. Hitler's obsession with Jews shaped his life and his politics. It led him to unleash a campaign of terror and genocide. This essay delves into the dark history of Hitler and the Jews. We will explore the factors that contributed to his rise to power. We will examine the implementation of his horrific anti-Semitic policies, and we will confront the devastating impact these policies had on Jewish communities. This is a story of prejudice, persecution, and ultimately genocide. It is a story that must be told and retold. We must never forget the atrocities committed against the Jewish people. We must learn from this dark chapter of human history. Only then can we hope to prevent such horrors from ever happening again. The Holocaust stands as a stark warning. It reminds us of the dangers of unchecked hatred and intolerance. It compels us to confront prejudice in all its forms. It demands that we stand up for the vulnerable and marginalized. We must remember so that we can act. Adolf Hitler's early life offered few clues to the monster he would become. Born in Austria in 1889, he was a frustrated artist. He dreamed of greatness, but found only rejection. He drifted to Vienna, a city teeming with both opportunity and social unrest. There he encountered the poisonous ideologies of anti-Semitism and German nationalism. These ideas took root in his mind, festering and growing. World War I provided the catalyst for Hitler's transformation. He served in the German army, experiencing the thrill of combat and the bitterness of defeat. He returned to a Germany in turmoil, humiliated by the Treaty of Versailles and crippled by economic depression. The seeds of resentment sown in Vienna blossomed into full-blown hatred. Hitler found a receptive audience for his venomous rhetoric. He blamed the Jews for Germany's woes, exploiting their vulnerability to fuel his own ambition. Step by step, Hitler led Germany down a dark path. He promised national revival and economic prosperity. But his true goal was far more sinister, the creation of an Aryan superstate, purged of Jews and other undesirables. His rise to power was swift and brutal. He exploited democratic institutions to dismantle democracy itself. By 1933, Hitler had become Chancellor of Germany, his grip on power absolute. The nightmare was about to begin. Table of contents, Part 2, Hitler's early life, about 3 sections. 1, a frustrated artist, and 2, seeds of hatred. Three, the shadow of war, Section 1, a frustrated artist. Adolf Hitler's early life was marked by disappointment and unfulfilled ambition. Born in Braunau am Inn, Austria in 1889, Adolf Hitler's early years were marked by a series of significant events that shaped his personality and future ambitions. This small town, nestled on the banks of the Inn River, was a quiet and unassuming place, far removed from the tumultuous events that would later define his life. As a child, Adolf was restless and often difficult, displaying a temperament that was both challenging and unpredictable. He was known to be a dreamer, often lost in his own thoughts and fantasies, which set him apart from his peers. His early years were filled with a sense of unease and dissatisfaction, a feeling that he could never quite fit in with the other children. His father, Alois, was a strict and authoritarian customs official, a man who demanded respect and obedience from his family. Alois's rigid and often harsh demeanor created a tense and oppressive atmosphere at home. He was a man of few words, but his presence was always felt, casting a long shadow over the household. The young Adolf clashed frequently with his father, their relationship marked by constant conflict and misunderstanding. Alois had high expectations for his son, hoping he would follow in his footsteps and pursue a stable and respectable career. However, Adolf had different aspirations, ones that did not align with his father's rigid plan. Adolf yearned for a more creative path, one that allowed him to express himself freely and escape the confines of his father's expectations. Art became his refuge, a way to channel his emotions and find solace in a world that often felt hostile and unwelcoming. He spent countless hours drawing and painting, losing himself in the process and finding a sense of peace that eluded him in other aspects of his life. The stifling atmosphere of his childhood home only intensified his desire to break free and pursue his own path. The walls of their modest home seemed to close in on him, suffocating his dreams and ambitions. Yet it was within these very walls that his determination to succeed and prove himself began to take root. The tension and conflict that defined his early years would later fuel his drive and ambition, propelling him towards a future that would change the course of history. Hitler dreamed of becoming a painter, of capturing beauty and emotion on canvas. He applied to the prestigious Vienna Academy of Fine Arts, convinced of his own talent. But his hopes were dashed when the Academy rejected him, not once, but twice. The rejections cut deep, fueling a sense of resentment and inadequacy that would fester within him. Undeterred, Hitler remained in Vienna, scraping by as a struggling artist. He sold postcards and painted watercolors of the city's landmarks. But success eluded him. He lived a hand-to-mouth existence, drifting from one cheap lodging house to another. Immersed in poverty and surrounded by the city's underbelly, Hitler became increasingly withdrawn and embittered. Vienna, in the early 20th century, was a melting pot of cultures and ideologies. The city was a vibrant hub of intellectual and artistic activity, attracting thinkers, artists, and writers from all over Europe. The streets were alive with the sounds of different languages, and the cafes buzzed with discussions on philosophy, politics, and art. It was a place where new ideas flourished and where the old and the new coexisted in a dynamic and sometimes uneasy balance. However, beneath this veneer of cultural richness, Vienna was also a city rife with anti-Semitism. Anti-Jewish sentiments were deeply ingrained in the social fabric, manifesting in various forms of discrimination and hostility. Posters and graffiti with hateful messages were a common sight, and rallies promoting anti-Semitic ideologies drew significant crowds. This pervasive prejudice created an environment of fear and exclusion for the Jewish community, who had long been an integral part of Vienna's cultural and economic life. It was in this charged atmosphere that a young Adolf Hitler found himself. Arriving in Vienna with dreams of becoming an artist, he was soon confronted with the harsh realities of life in the city. He struggled to make a living and faced rejection from the art academy he so desperately wanted to join. As he wandered the streets and frequented the cafes, he was exposed to the rampant anti-Semitism that permeated Viennese society. This exposure had a profound impact on him, shaping his worldview and fueling his growing resentment. The newspapers of the time were filled with articles that echoed the anti-Semitic sentiments prevalent in society. These publications played a significant role in spreading and reinforcing hateful ideologies. Hitler, an avid reader, consumed these articles with fervor, internalizing their messages and allowing them to further distort his perceptions. The media's portrayal of Jews as the root of societal problems resonated with his own frustrations and failures, providing a convenient scapegoat for his personal grievances. As Hitler's disdain for Jews grew, he began to seek out like-minded individuals and groups who shared his views. He gravitated towards organizations that espoused anti-Semitic ideologies, finding a perverse sense of belonging in their hateful rhetoric. These groups provided him with a platform to express his growing animosity and to connect with others who validated his prejudices. The camaraderie he found in these circles further solidified his beliefs and set him on a path of increasing radicalization. In these gatherings, Hitler honed his oratory skills, learning to articulate his views with increasing fervor and conviction. The anti-Semitic rhetoric he encountered and participated in became a central part of his identity, shaping his future actions and ambitions. The seeds of hatred sown in the streets and cafes of Vienna would later grow into the devastating ideologies that fueled his rise to power and the atrocities of the Holocaust. The lessons of this dark chapter in history serve as a stark reminder of the dangers of unchecked prejudice and the importance of fostering tolerance and understanding in our societies. The seeds of his monstrous ideology were sown. Vienna was a breeding ground for extremist political views. Nationalism, anti-Semitism, and a yearning for a glorious past permeated the city's political discourse. Hitler devoured these ideas, finding in them a twisted justification for his own failures. He came to believe that the Jews, with their perceived wealth and influence, were to blame for Germany's woes. He immersed himself in the works of anti-Semitic writers and ideologues. These texts were not just casual readings, they were the foundation of his growing hatred. He spent countless hours poring over every word, every sentence, absorbing the venomous ideas that these writers propagated. The more he read, the more he became convinced of their twisted logic. He believed that these writers held the ultimate truth about the world's problems, and that truth in his mind was the supposed threat posed by the Jewish people. This immersion was not a passive activity. It was an active, deliberate choice to embrace a worldview filled with hatred and bigotry. Their words became his gospel, shaping his worldview and fueling his hatred. He began to see the world through a distorted lens, one that was clouded by the toxic ideologies he had consumed. These writings were more than just books, they were a call to action, a rallying cry for those who shared his beliefs. He saw himself as a soldier in a war against an imagined enemy, and these texts were his battle plans. The more he read, the more his hatred grew, and the more he felt justified in his beliefs. He was no longer just a man with prejudices. He was a zealot, driven by a fervent belief in the righteousness of his cause. He saw conspiracies everywhere, convinced that the Jews were engaged in a secret plot to undermine German society. This belief was not based on any evidence, but on the paranoid delusions that had been planted in his mind by the anti-Semitic literature he had consumed. He saw the hand of the Jews in every misfortune, every setback, every failure. To him, they were the invisible enemy, working behind the scenes to bring about the downfall of his people. This belief in a vast, shadowy conspiracy gave him a sense of purpose, a mission to expose and destroy the supposed threat. It was a dangerous delusion, one that would have catastrophic consequences for millions of innocent people. His anti-Semitism became an obsession, a lens through which he viewed the world. Every event, every interaction, every piece of news was filtered through this lens of hatred. He saw the Jews as the root of all evil, the source of all his problems. This obsession consumed him, driving him to ever greater extremes in his quest to rid the world of what he saw as a malignant force. It was an all-consuming hatred, one that left no room for doubt or compassion. In his mind, the Jews were not just an enemy, they were the enemy, the ultimate threat to his vision of a pure and perfect society. This obsession would lead him down a dark and destructive path, one that would leave a lasting scar on the history of humanity. In 1913, Hitler left Vienna for Munich, Germany. He carried with him a heart full of resentment and a mind poisoned by prejudice. He found Germany on the brink of war, a nation eager for a strong leader to restore its former glory. Hitler saw an opportunity to exploit this yearning for his own sinister purposes. The outbreak of World War I in 1914 was a turning point in Hitler's life. He volunteered for the German army, eager to prove his worth on the battlefield.